Salam Roldas. Today we have prepared for you an interview with a union worker from Homegrown. Homegrown is an American sandwich chain that is based in Seattle. Fast food workers are some of the lowest paid jobs in the US, so it's no surprise that they are solidarizing. Our today's hero successfully unites the workers of the whole city. Behind him are many protests and strikes. The work of American unionists is quite different from the ones that we have in the post-Soviet countries, so I would like to learn from this comrade and perhaps adopt the method and approaches of their work. Hello, Cal.
Hello, how you doing, Max?
Good, good.
Good.
I'm very happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate you.
Yep. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your biography? Where did you grow up? How did you come to this?
Yeah, my name is Cal. I actually grew up in the Pacific Northwest in the Thurston County area, and I really started involving myself with radical politics at the beginning of COVID and the beginning of 2020 and all the craziness that went with that year in our country. I think what really pushed me towards a more unique perspective, a more principled perspective on socialism specifically, was actually the events that conspired in the George Floyd uprising in Seattle. The CHOP location is what really radicalized me into like organizing, because CHOP itself was very destructive because of the lack of organization. And so that's what made me realize we need to be disciplined, we need to be professional, and we need to organize in a real capacity and not in some idealistic fashion. And yeah, I think, building up to that, I've always had an interest in working outside of the status quo. I think there was a lot growing up that didn't sit quite right with me. I know.
Let's step back and talk about Chaz. How did you participate there? What did you do there?
Well, at this point, I wasn't really organized, truth be told. And I think, like I said, this is what really pushed me into it. I was kind of like I was on my own, really, in Chaz. And I didn't join an organization until after the fact. And I think being alone and sort of being, mistrusted because of that, and also unable to figure out what was going on because I didn't have anyone to talk to, pushed me in that direction. But I was there pretty much, every other day that it was active. I would go to all the marches, all the rallies, hear all the speakers talk about what we need to do, what we don't need to do.
Yep.
But
what was that point? You probably grew up on the idea that socialism is horrible.
Oh, yeah.
It has so many crimes. It was like killing billions and billions of people every day. You know, and how did you come up from this to the point where, oh wow, I have a Soviet Union hat on me,
Yeah. There was a point during Chaz, actually. But, there's been many points in my life that have led me to making that solid decision. And the point in Chaz was, we were trying to get together people to go to a rally, to go to a protest outside of the Chaz area. And at this point, I think this was like a week into Chaz being a thing. And at this point, I think it was about half the population within getting drunk, partying, not really doing any effective organizing, and the other half trying to galvanize those people into action. And there was this one person who was a very strong leader who was walking around trying to get people to join the rally, and everyone was just like, we're here to have a good time, man. We're not here to do the work. And he said quietly to himself, and I heard this, he said, we're never going to have a revolution in this country. We're not going to get this shit.
Wow.
And that was kind of a wake-up call for me. It's like, we need to do the work. It's so important, and it produces a lot of great value for us, not only in the material gains, but also in the confidence and the control we can take over our lives. And that was like kind of my first really slap to the face that like we need to get shit done. Yeah.
Interesting, very interesting. And then the reason you came over here, you want to talk about unions.
That's right.
Worker unions, the
Yeah.
co-ops here, yeah?
That's right.
Then very curious how it is going on, because unionization is happening all over the world now. It's like a wake up now, like it's happening
yeah.
in Russia, it's happening in Kazakhstan, in my
It's
home
so
country.
inspiring.
It's still strong in this European social democratic countries, and it's kind of coming back in the US, you know, like
Yeah.
And so what brought you there? From radical anarchistic Chas, you went to pretty interesting, good, organized movement. What was this? What was this transition? How it was happening?
I was a student at the time of the 2020 uprisings, and I think that pushing moment in Chaz led me to like, okay, how do I do this at my workplace? How do I organize? How do I get a union?
What did you work at that time?
At that time,
or you can
this
just
is the
say
fun part.
something similar, not this company.
No, the company I currently organize with was not where I started. At the time of the uprisings and at the time that I started getting into this, I actually worked for Amazon. I worked at a retail store, not a warehouse, not a driver. This is something.
Stores?
What's that?
What does it mean, retail store? Like they don't have stores that's online. They're online.
Right. So
you mean this Amazon bookstore or what?
Kind of. Yeah. So kind of. So Seattle has a lot of like unique things that are only in Seattle in relation to Amazon, and one of those things that Jeff Bezos wanted to experiment with was called Amazon 4-star. And this is
I've been at that store.
It's a joke to try to get you to buy things you don't need, that are way too expensive. And
then why you didn't start organizing at Amazon?
So I joined this little ragtag group called Emergency Workers Organizing Committee, and I also joined. They actually were connected with this org that you see on my face, Cascadian Workers Association, who I am still committed and organizing with to this day. They're a wonderful organization. But Emergency Workers Organizing Committee, EWOC is what we call them, is basically just anyone who wants to figure out how to organize, just put together in one room. And so there is this leader, his name for brevity is Mike, and he pushed all of us to start agitating at the workplace and start asking the questions about what it means and how work affects us. And for me, and I think for a lot of workers, that's hard. That's not a comfortable thing to do at all, because we're trained our whole lives to keep that below the surface and not to talk about how work affects us. And so that was like a real challenge to do alone, because that's how it worked. That's how the Emergency Workers Organizing Committee operated, is you just did it alone with the advice of someone outside the job. And I realized that was insufficient. And especially for a company like Amazon, you need a team. You need a group of people working together, dedicated to the fight, not just a one-off person trying to organize a retail store.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we're moving towards your work now at Homegrown, yeah?
That's right.
I will give a note. I was working myself for fast food industry.
Ugh, God,
it's
terrible.
Jesus. 10 years ago, or 12 years ago. When I came over to the US, I worked in Alaska as a fish processor industry, and then I came over to here to work as a fast food industry, at Subway sandwiches.
Oof.
And the thing is, it's a very hard work actually, It's a very hard.
Dude.
When I came over there and I started working, I was like, oh, probably all works are like that, And then I worked there for a couple of years, while I was at school, like first year, freshman. Yeah, and there is this fast food that makes sandwiches. Yeah, the fast food Subway is like this, and this Homegrown is like this.
That's correct.
I have been at Homegrown. The thing is, all my coworkers are great fans of Homegrown. At 12 p.m., they go downstairs to the office, and then they go to this closest store, and there is a line of like 50 people.
Yep.
And we have to spend 20 minutes in line to get to the sandwich. And I'm like, I'm not going anymore. I don't want to spend 20 minutes. And the most important, this sandwich is so simple. It's so simple. It's like they're like arguing it's very natural, it's very good, but it's just a piece of bread that usually you have in your fridge, you know. Subway at least have some.
They have some character to it.
Yeah. And this is like, I was like, am I getting paid for just opening my fridge and putting all this food? This is like strange, and it's expensive. I don't know. I don't remember. Like
so expensive. It's
$15
ridiculous.
or something like crazy.
Before tax and tip, yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
How much they charge and how little they pay us with that insane price.
Yep. And you work at this Homegrown, yeah?
I do, and that's where I really started getting into the real organizing. I would consider it. Yeah, I think, you know,
tell us about your organization. How many people you have? How many workers you mobilized? How many?
So this is with a union that represents hotel and restaurant employees, and they.
Okay, step aside. What do you mean by union? There is already some union that exists.
This is an existing union.
Okay, and it's officially registered, or it's
yes, this union is officially recognized. They have workers who are already under their union, and they are trying to organize the Homegrown company, which does not yet have a union. So, yeah, the way that works is actually through this process called salting. And salting is where workers are sent into a company for the sole purpose of trying to organize and unionize that workplace.
Wow.
And that is...
You have that?
Yeah, that is what I was doing at that job.
You first found this union, and then they said, hey, Cal, just go to this company and work there, try to unionize worker there?
It was actually through the Emergency Workers Organizing Committee. That gentleman, Mike, he heard about this and he got me connected.
But how did it work? Like, there are already people who are active, or why Homegrown? Why you didn't go to Subway or McDonald's or?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, actually. So this was the beginning of the conversation we had with people who were employed with the union. When they met with us, the people who were at Emergency Workers Organizing Committee, they discussed why they chose Homegrown, and there was already people who were salting by the time they came to me. And they had chosen Homegrown because it's a growing company. It's kind of taken this niche in Seattle of
fancy food,
green capitalism. Yeah. They're the sandwich green capitalism, basically. And they're doing really well for themselves, actually. They've made several multi-million-dollar acquisitions in the past couple of years.
No doubt.
Yeah, they have grown magnificently over the pandemic.
But salary somehow didn't grow. Yeah.
Wages didn't grow, benefits didn't grow, nothing for the workers grew, but their company and their profits grew.
Yeah, let's go deeper into that. I was working there. I didn't even know there is such a thing as medical insurance, as dental insurance, as all this stuff, you know. And what about Homegrown? Do they have maybe something revolutionized now? Everyone is having $15 salary and all this stuff, you know.
Well, I want to be clear. We're still fighting for our union. They have not given us recognition. Have.
What about medical? Do you have medical cover?
As it stands, you have to be, I believe, and this might be incorrect, but I believe the last policy that I know of was that you had to wait 60 days before you had medical insurance. And then the medical insurance they do provide, it is not cheap. It is not an affordable health care, and it is not comprehensive. It does not cover dental. It does not cover eye or hearing checks.
What does it cover?
Yearly checkups, and I think like 1 or 2 emergencies a year.
The cost of it will be here on the text, you know.
Yeah, it's not gonna be good. I'll tell you that. Whatever price they're looking at is not good. I know I've talked to people about this who do have the Homegrown health insurance. Thankfully, I'm still young enough to be with my parents' insurance, and they're fully employed. And actually, they're in healthcare, so they have wonderful insurance. But yeah, I only have that for the next 2-3 years.
Have you have your coworkers had this situation, or I don't know, they broke their hand or something? What did they do?
Yeah, we actually had someone who broke their ribs on the job, and there was this whole fiasco with management. This is all hearsay, but management lied about what happened with the injury. Mm-hmm. They said that she was on break and therefore she was not, covered by. Yeah, and it was a whole fiasco that she's actually still dealing with. This was like a year ago, and she's still working with labor and industry to get her workers' comp. And the doctor who she went to, who is completely out of contact for some reason now, and it's just been this huge holdup. Because she doesn't have a central method of healthcare, and the mismanagement by her bosses. So it's like this compounding factor, and she's had to deal with these broken ribs with very little recourse.
Yep, and for that reasons, you need worker union. Man.
We do, yeah, for that and more, much more. There's so many problems at these companies.
Give us more information about worker union. How many people do you have?
Yes, so
an unofficial organization, as I understood.
At Homegrown, we are not officially recognized. So that's correct.
First of all, I don't understand, why do you need separate union? Why you cannot be part of that union that you mentioned before, and you can be all in one?
Technically, you can, but the process through which we did things. So this is how many workers we have signed on. So we did this process called card signing. And card signing is where we go to workers, we tell them we're forming a union, they sign a card. If we present a majority of people with that card signed to the boss, they have the option to give us that union immediately with no election, no process like that. But there is also an election process that is governmentally surveyed and watched, which we didn't want to go through because it's more powerful for it to be in our hands. And so we're not officially recognized because we haven't gone through the election, and our boss hasn't told us that we can voluntarily be recognized. So we're debating about where to go with that. But actually we have, I think it's a roughly 200 person company, 250 person company that is, growing.
How big is Homegrown?
200 to 250.
I mean, generally, how many workers are in Homegrown in Seattle, for example, 2,000, 3,000?
No. 200 to 250. Oh, that's the total workforce.
Number of workers.
Yeah, okay. But they really stretch that thin. And let me tell you, there's a huge portion of their workforce that does what's called ghost kitchens. And ghost kitchens, for those who don't know, are basically warehouses where they mass produce food and then ship it out to different cafes, hospitals.
And probably it's not in this state.
Yeah.
It's in some state where minimum wage is probably the smallest.
Well, they actually, it's all in-house. They do it all in the local area, and they source a lot of their food from out of state. Mm-hmm. That is true. Yeah, all the sandwich makers and all that, they're outside of Seattle, so they can knock below that minimum wage. Workers themselves are still severely underpaid. The work they do is just far beyond what any human should be responsible for in a single day.
Yeah, that's what makes this fast food work very hard.
It kills you.
Because you can make sandwiches. Customer came in, I make sandwiches. I was fine with that. Mm-hmm. And when my manager started telling me, you can't just stand and wait. You have to wipe something, cut the veggies, or do something.
Always
you have
be
to
working.
be always doing something, and that's so dumb, it's clean, everything is good. But you have to do something 8 hours per day,
Yeah, it's terrible.
Like how it works.
Yeah, and
okay,
especially
out of those 250 people, how many are in union? 10?
So we have, I think the numbers now are at 70 to 75% of the company are signed.
75% of Homegrown are unionized?
Have agreed to fight for the union. We don't have official recognition still, but yes, they are.
Wait, but you just mentioned if you bring this 50% to a boss, he will.
They have the choice. The boss has the choice, okay. And obviously they're going to choose not to.
Of course,
this is where
there is no choice here. It's so obvious.
And this is where we are organizing to put pressure on them, and we've done a lot of actions to hurt their pockets.
How many?
Man,
Are we talking about 20 protests per year, 30 protests, 10, 5 protests per year, protest actions? What about if you will just stop working and block them?
We've done that.
All these actions, how many actions were there for this year,
I'm trying
for
to
example?
remember.
But we're talking about dozens, or we're talking about
So
less than 10?
we started doing actions, I believe it was 4 to 6 months ago, and I think we've done at least 5 actions a month.
Wow, that's a lot.
So
Okay.
at least, you know.
Okay.
So it could be more than that.
Okay,
But
and let's go into details.
yeah, so the
What actions?
involved are, so the big ones were pickets. So we would picket outside of Homegrown stores, would be picketed in front of by, you know, workers from across the company, which would slow down their service. Not nearly as many customers would come in. And then, you know, it would build confidence in the workers when they see each other fighting and standing up for what they believe in.
Yep.
And so,
How
sorry, go ahead.
you were telling that you stopped production once, yeah? Like,
We did. Actually, we've had 6 different locations do strike action. And each strike was only a day, mind you. So it wasn't a long-term thing. But it was a day where no one came into the store. No one came into work, and no one broke the strike at any of these strikes. There was no...
how many stores of Homegrown total per?
There's 12.
12, so 6 of them?
Yeah, 6,
Then-
including, so there's 10 cafes and 2 warehouses. And it was, what was it? It was 5 cafes and 1 warehouse that took strike action in the past month. Yeah, that's been very recent that we took strike.
These are impressive numbers, very impressive, man.
Thank you. And we hope to do many more, you know, as we move forward. That's kind of the fork in the road that we're at. We have to make a decision about, do we want to take actually an indefinite strike until we get a union, or do we want to file for an election and do the legally protected process? Because if we do an indefinite strike, they can just fire us all, because we don't have a union officially yet, so we're not protected. So it would be a big risk. But the election process is more protected, and during the election process, we could take more strike actions to put pressure on the company to give us a better union contract.
Okay, and here we're going with the question what company is doing against you. Why they don't just fire you, you know, like...
The company's retaliation so far, I think everyone in the union describes it very well. In Seattle, we have something called the Seattle Freeze. And it's just this behavior that people have where they will be very passive, ignore you, and not directly confront the problem. And our boss has been very good at not confronting the problem. He's been largely ignoring us, is how he's been responding. The first public response that Homegrown bosses had was after our second strike. And the basic response was a bunch of bullshit. He just, you know, made up a bunch of bullshit about our demands. For example, there was a gender wage gap, and he just sort of said, oh, that's not a gender thing, it's actually a merit thing. And it just so happened that all the men worked harder than all the women.
Are we talking about 10% gap, 20% gap? Okay, here will be the number.
I don't know, yeah. I'm not sure about that one.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd have to ask. It's between like people who've gotten promotions and the promotions being... Here's the other thing, is our promotions are anywhere between 25 and 50 cents. Very small. So the difference between wage gap is also very small because of how little they give us. Yeah, it's a fucking joke, is what it is how they pay us. And that's one of our demands that our boss made fun of. And yeah, they are basically trying to ignore us until it demoralizes us, you know.
But
6 stores not working, it's very hard to ignore, man.
It's awesome. And you know, the workers.
But how do they react to this? They should be reacting
The boss?
to that, yeah.
They, you know,
I think it's very easy to calculate all those people who is with the USSR on their head, you know, like, yeah, they will be like, it's easy to find you and kick you out, you know.
Yeah, I think
Why he's not doing that? If you can just say, hey, I'll give you $1,000 if you will tell me who can, like, soften this pressure, you know.
It's funny, you know, I've kind of been expecting that, but they haven't. They haven't done anything. And I think, on the one hand, I think they are scared, because I think they know that the workers across the company, you know, maybe not as radical as me, but they're still ready to take action. And they've shown that through strike action, they've shown that through showing up at the pickets, they've shown that through all the other things that we've done as actions, not only for our company, but actually in solidarity with other workers in other companies organizing for their unions.
So yeah, now why only Seattle? Why you're working only in Seattle?
Yes.
If you would be blocking around the country,
Yeah,
that would be such a bomb, you know.
it would be huge. Yeah, I think the assessment of the hotel and restaurant employees union is that the labor movement is growing, but it is still small, and we have to target locations that are strategically beneficial. And Homegrown, as a growing location that is taking this niche in Seattle's market, and Seattle is full of like environmentally friendly liberal types who are obsessed with Homegrown and really believe it is healthy, sustainable, all the things it claims to be. And that's how it's been able to grow, is just off their image, their brand. This green capitalism is very heavy on branding. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Why you don't unite with other,
Yes.
well, first of all, other homegrown around the US, around the
Oh no,
world?
they're only in Seattle.
But why?
Well, although Seattle loves the way they do things, it's in truth not the greatest business model. They've tried to expand outside of the city and it fails each time, but they have held very strong onto Seattle. And they've actually, you know, all the growth that they've had is from the Seattle population. And I think there's something unique about the way in which green capitalism has sunk its claws into Seattle specifically. And Homegrown is just a representation of that. And I think the union that works on this sees that and wants to sort of flex their muscles a bit and, you know, experiment with new methods of organizing at this location. And for me, it's a great learning lesson because, you know, my long-term goal is to work with the Longshoremen's Union, dock work essentially, and organize a, you know, shutdown of the American economy as a whole.
Sounds so good.
So this is like building my skills towards that.
Yeah, it sounds so good. Okay, now we're going, I understood it's Seattle. Why don't fast food industry unite together, you know, like McDonald's, like all this Subway, all this different companies? Why because you know what, if Homegrown will be crossed, they'll just go to Subway across the street, you know. They'll be like, okay, Homegrown lost their customer.
That's right. And, you know, there is a lot of service workers who are organizing right now, and I think the biggest example in America is Starbucks right now. But if we have a sober analysis of what's going on at Starbucks.
You're going to a different topic. Why don't fast food workers organize united union together of restaurants?
Across the country.
No, not across the country. Let's suppose Seattle, you know.
Oh,
you
just in
you will
Seattle?
have friends who works at McDonald's, and then you will say, hey, let's create a one union, you know.
I see. The power of McDonald's and the preparation that they have to destroy union organizing is far beyond the capacity of Homegrown. And McDonald's, you know, and those big corporations that are national and even international, they are quick and well adapted to shutting down union organizing. And there have been attempts, you know, there's been a fight. There's actually been organizers in Homegrown who tried to organize Five Guys, and the Five Guys burger store, initially he presented a petition on better pay and better working conditions to his bosses, and they're middle management types. They're not like corporate, and they were actually very supportive initially. They were like, you guys deserve better. We think we're on your side. This is really cool. And then they had their call with corporate, and corporate told the middle management that if they don't get their workers in check, that middle manager is going to lose their job. So the middle manager came back to the workers and starts cracking down on them, starts yelling at them, starts punishing them, because that middle manager was scared of losing their job. And it's this corporate
mechanism.
Yeah, it's this corporate mechanism that is just so well trained, is so well prepared on the large scale, that they can weaponize it at any time. And we are seeing this with even the successful union campaigns in food and in service.
Wow, that's very impressive to hear. Okay. So, around the US doesn't work for you, around the industry doesn't work for you yet. Let's hope you will build to be strong there. Yeah,
that's what this is. The Homegrown campaign is about. Actually, we're escalating to larger and larger fish, I suppose you could call them.
Okay, so tell us how you did that. You were sent by union to get hired.
That's right.
And they gave you like instruction. You should ask this question. How long it took you to be like a silent first, and then you have to activate it, or you don't want to open all the secrets yet?
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it is a very. You have to keep the secret of the union for a long, long time. And they sent me in. I've been working there for about a year and 3 months now. And for a very long time, I think, how long was it? I believe it was 10 months. We were not talking to anybody about the union. We were just talking about the problems at work and how work has affected us. And again, that's not something we're comfortable talking about.
10 months, you
just talking about problems, yeah. And then after 10 months,
then you're like dropping like Lenin's book on the forgetting the Lenin's book like under the.
I'm sneaking it in there. That's right. Yeah, exactly. You have to. In that you build class consciousness from the source of agitation. You identify what's at stake in their lives, and you build off that to say, this is why we take action. And that takes a long time to get people to that point because of how much we're trained not to think like that. It's very particular. It's a very intentional thing by the American apparatus to train workers not to think about that stuff.
Okay, let's now a little bit dive into socialism. How you have this union, unofficial union. How many of these people are class conscious, socialists, communists? 10%, 20%?
I think 10% is I don't have the exact numbers, but if I had to guess.
What's your impression?
Yeah, 10%.
Yeah. And the rest of them, they are just for.
They care about like changing their material conditions, but they haven't made the connection from that to their class.
Yeah. Okay. That's at least honest answer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate reality, but I think again the American individualism has just been so ingrained in our minds.
I totally agree. What about the group that I have sent you? You're talking about them, or you're talking about the union that of Homegrown that unofficially exists?
Well, the group that sent me, like Cascadian Workers Association and the Emergency Workers Organizing Committee, I'd say it's closer to. Well, Cascadian Workers Association, we're all communists.
Yeah.
But Emergency Workers, they were, I'd say about 50-50, give or take.
Good number.
Give or take.
What number are we talking about?
Like how many people?
How many people and how many sleeping agents are around?
So for Emergency Workers, it was a small group. It was like 6 or 7 people when I was there. I think it's grown to in the 20s or 30s. But at Homegrown, it was the sleepers, as you call them, the salts were, I think there was one per store, so about 10 to 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they had varying levels of class consciousness, I would say. Not all of them were fully, and not all of them still are fully grasping the ideological need.
Okay. Okay. So yeah. So how dangerous it is to be a worker union in the U.S.? Can you be beaten, killed, threatened?
It's tough.
Or just fired? That's the worst can happen.
I think it really depends where you are. I think in Seattle, it is a very
safe,
union-centric city relative to the rest of the country. And that is all to the credit of hardworking trade unionists, communists who are dedicated to the cause.
Okay, when we were talking about worker unions, I want to tell you one funny story. There is a Russian blogger. His name is Semin. He's the most popular Russian left YouTuber.
Nice.
He has like, I don't know, 100,000 views, like stable.
Yeah.
He's good. He's pushing it very well. And he asked us to shoot the videos.
Yeah.
Walking in the street and asking about unions. What do people about worker union?
Yeah.
And all over the world. So we did it in New York. His friends did it in Russia. One guy did it in Belarus. And you know what? US showed the most positive percentage of people.
Oh yeah.
In New York, not here, man. I didn't participate in that thing, and I was so pleasantly surprised, and everyone was surprised, like, wow, US. And people were like, we need worker unions, they're good, they're cool, we need more of them, like, they're fighting for their right, they're changing the world. We were so shocked with that, man, because when we were trying to ask people in Russia, they were like, it's something that happened in Soviet Union, now it's useless. They generally, the official union, all they do, they give gifts during New Year to children of the workers, like gifts that cost like $1 or something that. Yeah, it's like fake unions,
Yeah. There's something to be said about in America they're called yellow unions.
Yeah, yellow unions.
Yeah.
In Kazakhstan too.
Yep. I mean, they're everywhere. I think the saying goes that specifically neoliberalism is very good at internalizing dissent.
Yeah. What is the percentage-wise of the yellow unions and your hardcore real unions here in Seattle?
Well, there is
like majority of people, of course, in this fake unions. Like
that's the unfortunate truth of it, and even the more radical unions have their shortcomings, and I wouldn't call them revolutionary in any sense, actually, because of how good the American apparatus is at internalizing dissent. And I think that's a big challenge that we face as socialists in the trade unionist movement, is how do we combat that even in the most radical unions. But I think percentage-wise, the amount of actual yellow unions probably is somewhere around 70% of union workers. I think there's a growing minority of workers, even in yellow unions, who are breaking out of that form and making it more worker-centric instead of class collaborationist.
Interesting. There is a lot of, there is some criticism of communists that work on unions.
That's right.
Because let's suppose you're successful, man. Let's suppose you're good. Like, you actually set up your goals and you got it. Workers are paid $25 per hour.
Yep.
All this stuff is given to workers. The CEO is getting $500,000 instead of $2 million per year. Of course,
still too much.
Utopian, but let's suppose this happened. And how far are we from socialism? We're very far, right? Much further.
Very.
For example, in Norway, people will never go out in the street because they have the strong unions, yeah. But here in the U.S., people went out when this 2020 happened, right?
That's right.
And in very poor country like Bangladesh, revolution is more probable, right, than in the US. So there's degrees, you know. So don't you think you undermine socialism? You spoil socialism because capitalism, it should be as worse as better.
I think there is something to be said about how worsening conditions agitate workers into organizing. But I also think that the reason I started organizing was to radicalize workers in the safest way possible. And I think that we can not only provide for workers under capitalism, but show them that we only provide by taking it from the boss. We only provide for ourselves by taking back what was stolen from us, our labor power. And because of that, there is just going to be the challenge of you've won your union contract, whatever benefits come with it, but that's not enough, actually. And this is the push that we have to make as communists in the trade unionist movement. And it's not a push that's going to happen from people who are solely trade unionist. Lenin talks about this, what is to be done? Give it a read. Yeah.
Talking about Lenin, don't you think it's actually scare people? This thing on your forehead?
It can be, yeah.
It's like, maybe you shouldn't do it. Maybe you should be like actually say, no, I'm not communist, I am a socialist, for example. It's much milder word,
Semantic.
Because people, no, it's not semantic. People can go and say, oh, you're a communist, let's look up. Oh, it's USSR. Oh, USSR, they killed like 50 million people, personally Stalin killed, Yeah. And they will say it to you, and they will say, hey, fuck you, Cal, with your unions,
I think you have to meet people where you're at. Where you have to meet people where they are at. That's what I meant to say. And
you mean here, you're okay wearing that, but
yes.
at some meetings,
yeah, at union meetings, I don't wear this. Yeah, at union meetings, I don't wear this, but I say and I act on things that push people towards this. You can't just assume that people are going to be okay. They've been taught their whole lives that this is a genocidal war machine, when it's, completely opposite in truth. And I think it just takes patience. It takes patience even to get people to want a union, to want to organize for a union. It's one thing to say to want a union. It's another thing to actually go out and organize for it. And that is a challenge in and of itself. And you have to build first the strength to organize, and then escalate and organize the class, not just your company. And, for a lot of people, it takes that proof of concept that you can win when you fight. And for a lot of people in my workplace, it's been a very slow process, but we're getting them towards the point where they're actually not only fighting for their wins, for their victories, but for other workers, not only in this country, but actually outside the country. We've talked about international struggle and how, Homegrown has a very small role in it, but a role nonetheless, in terms of where they source their food. Some of their food is from the international food supply chain, which is very abusive towards third world workers. And we source, I could list off the food that we source from out of country. Roasted red peppers. I get the list for you, but yeah, that's the one that comes to mind.
Have you heard about this cranberry co-op producers? I forgot the name. Ocean Spray. Actually, the second thought was talking about them. There is a worker co-op.
Let's put things into perspective with a specific example. Ocean Spray. If you've ever shopped for groceries at a supermarket in the US, odds are you've seen their products sitting on store shelves in the juice or canned fruit aisles. They're arguably the most recognizable cranberry brand in the country, and they were the very first to produce cranberry juice commercially back in the 1930s. It's somewhat ironic that the biggest name in cranberries, a quintessentially American fruit native to the continent and a mainstay of the traditional Thanksgiving dinner, forgoes participation in the equally American practice of employee exploitation. But just how well have they managed? Far from being unable to grow big enough to stand against the corporate competition, Ocean Spray has flourished. Today, they're the largest producer of cranberries in the world, with over $1 billion in annual sales. Yet all this financial success has not compromised their commitment to fair compensation. The full 100% of all profits the business generates are distributed right back to the farmers. No shareholder dividends necessary. And cranberry farmers especially deserve the metaphorical fruits of their labors, given that the wolf spiders often used as natural pest control end up crawling all over their bodies whenever they flood the bog for harvesting.
The company All Cranberry in the US, this popular cranberry juice, is produced by Ocean Spray.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I know the brand though. I remember seeing the brand.
Yeah.
My American
And
brand.
this is all farmers, only co-op, like 700 workers, like.
It's impressive.
Yeah, I really hope there will be more of it. And
Yeah.
talking about international solidarity, have you read Lenin's word to Seattle workers?
What's it called?
I don't remember the exact name, but I'm sure if you would Google Seattle workers Lenin, he would find when the war happened against the Soviet Union.
Yes.
Actually, Soviet Union maybe didn't exist even at that time. It
Yeah.
was 1920. Yeah, it was this revolution happened. New socialist republic existed, and U.S. is supporting this white movement who was fighting against red movement, and the workers here, they protested and they shut down the plant, they shut down docks, and that was so
I love
cool.
it.
And Lenin
Yeah.
actually mailed them saying like, I support Seattle workers, thank you very much for your solidarity.
Seattle, I mean, it's been gutted by the tech industry, but it used to be such a strong center of labor power. Not in the Marxist sense, but labor power in the sense that workers were the strongest in Seattle than they were really anywhere else in the country. There's a few other hot spots, but Seattle actually was one of those cities leading the charge for, the 8-hour workday, the 5-day work week, and all these other things that workers fought for. Seattle was at the forefront.
Yeah, but why it's not working or it's not so effective right now? One of my friends, they told me, the companies are giving stocks, For example, once someone works at Microsoft as software engineer, he's getting like $100,000 of his salary and then $50,000 in the stock of the company. So if the company is getting richer, he is richer, and he seriously thinks that he controls the company and he is like owns the company. I'm always laughing at that. But it's not only about software engineering now, because I've heard like 5 years ago actually that Starbucks is giving stocks to its workers too. And I was asking around, like when I went to Starbucks, I was always trying to talk to workers. And for me, it was like a growth, like, wow, now Starbucks workers will be co-owners. It will ruin our socialist movement for 10 years, Yeah. But when I asked, they said they receive like $200 of stock per year, or like some
Crumbs.
ridiculous low number, Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're fighting for those crumbs, bro. And
Yeah.
what do you think about that? Do you think it will solve the problem if the companies will start giving stocks to everyone?
Well,
Or it will at least ruin your worker union,
the way I like the way that unions talk about this. This is it puts things in a very simple light. Bosses have 3 methods of persuading workers not to organize. Those 3 methods are the carrot, the stick, and surveillance, for lack of a better word. The carrot and the stick, though, to explain them a little more, are bribes are carrots and discipline are sticks. And what bosses and capitalists have realized in the past 20 years is that bribes and making a workplace culture where your boss is kind of like your family, and you feel sort of this warm fuzzy feeling when your boss says good job. This is like the carrot that bosses across the country have been using to sort of dissuade workers from moving forward. And the important thing to recognize, even for software engineers, even for the labor aristocracy as it's called, is that all those privileges are given. And just as easily as they are given, they can be taken away. And the only way to fix that is by putting the power in the hands of those software engineers, in the hands of the workers, not in the hands of the boss, who can give and take as he so chooses.
Interesting. Sounds hardcore communist, man.
Yeah, man, I mean, that's the truth. They're not, like, when things get bad, and we're already kind of seeing this, like in like the tech industry, you know, there's software developers and engineers who are getting either automated, outsourced, or something in between those two things. And no worker is safe, not even if you're a labor aristocrat, as they're defined.
Yep, I agree. Talking about your Cascadian Workers group, why are you not in the DSA, Socialist Alternative, or in PSL? There is 3 strong communist parties, actually, you know?
This is always I always love discussing this, because we are a small group. We don't have nearly the influence that a group like DSA.
It would be so much better if you would be part of a party that can help you at your work, you know, bring people.
But let's ask, I've been asking myself this question for a long time now, is what direction is that influence going? Where are they using that resource? And this isn't to say that they don't have resources. The DSA, PSL, Socialist Alternative, all these big orgs have resources and they have connections. But how they're using them is either insufficient or incorrect. It's that simple. To be more specific, you know, with DSA, I know a lot about the local chapter and their misuse of funds. And
specific examples?
It's just an overuse of money on social events or parties or things that don't really grow the organizing potential of their members. A lot of the problem with DSA is that they have a lot of members, but most of their members don't do anything. They're what we call paper members. On paper, they are a member, but in practice, they do jack shit. And you know, with a group like PSL or SA, where they're a little more inclined to Marxist thought, there is just this sort of this mentality that they have it all figured out and that you need to do things exactly how they tell you. And I think that's not what Marxism is about. It's actually about investigation and understanding the material conditions through your own experience. And I think I joined PSL for a time, actually. And I also joined a Trotskyist group called the Freedom Socialist Party. And they had their methods set up and basically bureaucratized. With FSP, I was doing phone taps for their list of people on their phones, and you know, half of them would say they'd show up to a rally, half of them wouldn't, and that's not real organizing to me. And then PSL, their process is just, you gotta show up to enough stuff and then we'll vet you for approval. And they don't really show you, they don't give you the tools it takes to show up and organize. You know, I would go to PSL events and I'd be like, hey, I'm here to help, what can I do? And it's like, oh, we already got it figured out. And it's like, what the fuck am I here, what am I here for? Why am I a member of your party? And so this led to me actually meeting with an old friend who is a member of the Cascadian Workers Association, who told me everything about what they do and like how their central goal is to build the tools and the skills of every member to organize wherever they are. Even if that's not the workplace. We have a few people who are working with a tenant union, you know, who are building power against landlords instead of bosses. You know, that's something we need to do. I mean, that's our sort of mass project. But yeah, they gave me the tools. Cascadian Workers Association, which I am now in the leadership of, gave me the tools to understand what it means to organize, what it takes, and where to go with that new lesson learned.
Yeah, interesting. That's so bad that there is no this clash between the socialist parties and unions, you know?
Cascadian Workers Association, we do everything we can to be on good terms with the other socialist parties. In our assessment, and I think every rational Marxist party's assessment, is that we aren't the vanguard. None of us are the vanguard of the masses like we should be. And we're all working in different methods and techniques to move towards that. And none of them have proved fruitful, or at least fruitful enough to really set things off in a productive way. The closest organization, I think, that got to revolution in America was the Black Panther Party. And I think that's testament to I think what will set things off in this country is national liberation. And what we can do as workers is build that class consciousness to ally ourselves with the liberators of the Black nation and the indigenous nation. But yeah, I think that's the kicker, man. We shouldn't fight. There's going to be different orgs and different groups, and we should collaborate as much as we can, because I think it's useless to try to poach members of other groups into your org. We all do good work, and we need to keep doing that good work.
Interesting.
I just have opinions.
Yeah. Okay, you talked a lot about unions. Yeah, let's a little bit dive into your personality.
Yeah, man.
What books influenced you the most?
Oh, the first the first piece of theory I read was by a Trot. And I have respect for Trotskyists, but he really hammered home this sort of dogmatic principle. It's this book called, it's basically Marxism for Dummies. Marxism Basics. I'll look up the book and I'll send it to you later.
These kind of books, they're so good, first 80%. And then he's starting slamming Stalin and all this.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Christ.
And
I wanted to recommend everyone this book, but then now I cannot recommend this book to anyone.
I think it still provides valuable lessons. The book I read was, simply talking about what dialectical materialism was, because that was my first sort of pinup, or my misunderstanding, is I didn't really get what it was. But when I read it, it clicked. There's this sort of thing in my brain that flipped a switch, it felt like. And it's like, why doesn't everybody think like this? We all think so formally about things. We think things are in rigid categories and they don't change out of those categories. When in reality, everything is constantly shifting and changing and evolving and devolving. And the way we think about things as Americans and the way we're taught to think about things is simply lacking in that respect. So that was the first piece of theory I read, and it really helped me understand actual historical theory in a much better way. And I think after that I read, which one was it? It was one of Lenin's. It was one of Lenin's classics. I think it was State and Rev. I think was just the first one I read right off the bat.
Americans love this book.
For some fucking reason, we love State and Revolution. But it's a great fucking read. I don't know.
Did your comrades make you to read that?
Yeah, they recommended it, I will say. The first book I was actually recommended to read because I had a lot of questions about the history of communism when I first joined and first started becoming a Marxist. The first thing I was recommended to read was this author named Grover Fur
Grover. Awesome.
Fur Grover. Yeah. Great fucking books. I never read them. Way too dense for me.
Really?
Yeah, not yet. I mean, at the time. I plan on reading them. But I'm in the education sector of our organization, so I have other readings that I'm responsible for at the moment. We just finished up How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney, another great read.
So you haven't read this Khrushchev Light book,
I didn't know he wrote about that. Yeah. I mean, I've heard
the topic very well.
I definitely want to look into it, but I mean, he was The person who introduced me to Cascadian Workers Association was like, if you really want to know, that's who you got to look to. But this is the big thing that I resonated with, is like, past experiments with socialism, although valuable in teaching us lessons, should not be our main focus, actually.
I totally agree with you. And this is such a good characteristics of American communists. Because in the post-Soviet Union countries, in Kazakhstan, in Russia, any discussion about socialism, any discussion about unions, it all comes back to, or they genocided us in 30s, and this is what socialism was. And then they're giving you numbers, and then you're talking about these numbers, and this discussion starts like 100 commentaries, several hours. With Americans, it's so much better. You talk about socialism, you talk about socialism. You're not like diving into history, you know? That's
because
so good, man.
it's not I mean, for us, you know, it's still, the revolution has not happened. And, you know, there hasn't been a sort of overthrow that I think a lot of people are subconsciously gravitating towards, especially now in the state of the country right now. But I think, I think it is very valuable to actually focus more on the present and what's going on now, because I think even you know, a true, I guess, revolution in Russia or in Eastern Europe would require a completely different tactic than what the Bolsheviks used, because we live in a completely different world than what the Bolsheviks did, and we're gonna need completely different tactics.
But our tactics right now, we have generally 3 instruments, right? We are using, like, I don't know, if I look, I can sort all actions that communists do in 3 parts. One part is, okay, actually 4 parts. One part is parliamentism. You can organize party, and then you can try to be elected. This
PSL does that.
Socialist Alternative with Shami Savant does that.
PSL does this too.
Okay, that's one way. Second way, they say, first we have to make theory. We have to write very good book that will explain everything and will be like a new capital. You
know? Investigation, no right to speak.
Yeah, yeah, and there are these Marxist groups, you know, they say, let's gather up, study Lenin, study Stalin, study Trotsky, study Marx, and we have to know everything perfectly, and only then you can do something, you know. Third group are you. They are saying we should organize worker union. We should be with workers, you know, like we should be all about that, you know. And there are radicals in every group, you know. Some idiots say they do only this, nothing else. Good communist, I think he's using these instruments as much as he can, you know. And fourth is protests, either violent marches, either violent, non-violent, peaceful, but going out to the street and taking it over, you know, like.
There's shortcomings to all these tactics, you know. You got to use all of them. Actually. You know, I said earlier, I'm part of the education sector of our organization. I mean, we don't take education lightly. We have required readings, required discussions. Not everyone makes it to them all the time, but we sure give them shit if they don't. But yeah, the key process that I think communists have to understand is you have to be adaptable. You have to figure out what works best, not only for your material condition, but your changing material condition. Because, you know, even day by day, there can be a different scenario that requires a different tactic. Maybe one day it's a good idea to do trade unionism and focus on the unions. But maybe another day it's better to focus on who's getting elected. I don't think it's often the case where voting matters, but you know, maybe once in a while it does. I'm not one to say one way or another, but I do think we should be using all the tools at our availability. And I think that's one thing I give a lot of credit to Cascadian Workers Association for, is because they don't only teach how to organize a union, they don't only teach how to organize a mass organization like our tenant union that we work with. They also teach you how to connect with different members of the community that are, you know, crucial in building what we want to see as a dual power. For an example, we are in collaboration with a organization called the Urban Rural Coalition, and their goal is to develop a secondary food network in the event that the actual capitalist supply chain collapses, that we still have a way to convey food to each other. And that is actually a concrete form of dual power. It is still in the works, and it's hard to develop food independently in this country for very explicit reasons, but this is something we're building towards, is actual dual power, and having the tools to utilize it. I give a lot of respect to our organization, and for doing as much as we can to dabble in all of the tools at our disposal. We don't vote a lot.
What do you think about Kshama Savant, actually?
Kisham?
Yeah, Kshama Savant, the socialist alternative lady, the Trotskyist woman who is in actually City's Hall,
I think
she's still there, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't follow her.
There was a recall effort, but it was thwarted, thankfully. I will say.
Thankfully?
Yeah. Because if she gets replaced, someone's going to be worse than her. I think, why not? Like, she's there. Like, I think Socialist Alternative as an organization should put their energy into something else. But I think Kashama, being a council member, is beneficial to the cause. And I think not in a big way. It's not revolutionary, certainly. But it is beneficial.
But why there is no support of her from Homegrown Workers, for example, or some collaboration between you guys?
Oh yeah, I mean, her and 5 other council members signed a petition, so that's 6 out of the 9 council members, who sent it to our CEO demanding our union recognition. So our solidarity is there.
But CEO showed his middle finger, right?
What's that?
CEO showed his middle finger to it, right? Or
yeah, he ignored it completely.
Yeah.
And I think it was more to say, like, we're with you. And I think Kashama, I think the best way to think about her is, I had a really great conversation with my mail lady. My mail lady actually was talking about Kashama on the phone with someone, and I kind of rudely interrupted her to ask her like what she thinks. And she said, and this is the best way I can think of it, is that she gets a lot of things wrong, but she's the only person in that position who's going to stand up for poor people. And I think there is something to be...
The best out of worst, yeah.
Yeah, she's the best of the worst, and she is moving forward, these sorts of things that build worker power in very small ways. I don't think she should be the main focus of any organization. I think it's just a cool plus that she's there. That's what I think of her. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's bad. I think it's bad that they're putting so much energy into her campaigns and into the electoralism of her position, rather than focusing on rank and file organizing around issues that she can then push at a higher level. But it should be, rather than focusing around Kashama should be focusing around Socialist Alternative, and Socialist Alternative should be focusing on the masses. But it's reversed right now, which doesn't fucking work. Yeah, so the book that I'm reading right now by Vijay Prashad. And if you don't know who Vijay Prashad is, please look him up. He is probably the most well-known Marxist of our time. He goes around the world talking about imperialism, and he has some wonderful books and some wonderful speeches. Right now, I'm reading Red Star Over the Third World, and it's not necessarily about history or the historical facts of it, but it's about how inspiring what the communists of the 20th century did, how they overcame such impossible odds. I think it's so important to remind ourselves how impossible it seemed what they did, and how it can happen. It can happen anywhere. And it makes the most sense that it happens in the weakest link, but we have to be prepared for it to happen all over the world, because that's what we want, that's what we need, and that's what can happen. And I think Vijay Prashad and Red Star Over the Third World put that into writing in a really powerful way. It's really awesome. It's a great read. Please read it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a short read too. It's like 150 pages. Very simple.
What else, man? What are the American authors that are good?
Vijay Prashad is
Michael
Indian.
Parenti?
But Parenti killer. I haven't fully read any of Parenti's work, I'll be honest.
Wow.
I've actually read a lot of local literature. Literature about communist history in the Pacific Northwest. And the experiences of organizers in this region. Some unique, some universal, of course. And I think one of the really cool reads I recently did was of Forests and Fields. I forget the author, but it's a wonderful book about migrant, specifically Mexican labor in the eastern area.
Yakima?
What's that?
Yakima area?
Yeah, Yakima, and also, where's the other place? Yakima was the main spot. But of Forests and Fields specifically refers to the nature of the labor that these migrant workers did in the, I believe it was the 70s and the 80s, where in the summers and spring, they would work in the farms, on the fields, in these grueling conditions. And then to make enough money to survive over the winter, they would work in the forests to plant trees or to crop trees that were dead. And both of these jobs were very dangerous. A lot of poor people lost their lives, or were riddled with diseases or injuries because of these jobs. And it was actually one of the first sort of revamps or revitalizations of the labor movement was in the forests and in the fields by these Mexican workers in the late 20th century, well into the sort of neoliberal reforms that destroyed union power in the United States. So we owe a lot of where we're at today and where this building union movement is to migrant labor, to Mexicans who came to this country because we looted and plundered theirs, and they're looking for a better life, and they're still being hyper exploited, and they took a stand. In this state, in Washington, in California, and in Oregon, all across the coast, they were the ones that started the fight, that revitalized organizing in America.
But how? I thought immigrant workers, the weakest point, because migrant, he's on visa here, right? If he says the wrong word, he'll be kicked out from the country,
That's, I think for a lot of people, they made the decision that it was worth it, that they could risk deportation if it meant living the life they knew they deserved. And to be frank, the life that they needed to not die at 50, because that's what would happen to a lot of these workers, is they would be so incapacitated that their lifespan would be reduced by decades. And so they knew that there was these great risks, but they knew that in the end, when they have more power, it's worth it. It is worth it to make that sacrifice.
Yeah. So, have you watched any recent left movies? Like recent Parasite, for example?
Parasite was good. What was the...
Judah and Black Messiah?
Oh, I didn't see that one.
You didn't see it? You have to see it.
No, I know.
It's such a good movie.
I heard really good things about it.
We're like great fan of this movie,
Yeah, I think... Fuck, there was this one that was very on the nose, and it was literally, I can't remember what it was called, but it was literally like different floors of people. And you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the Spanish movie.
Yeah, it's kind of like comedic almost.
Platform.
Yeah, platform. And it's just so on the nose, it's funny. And it is kind of like inspiring in that way, because it's like, oh, this is very clear. Paints a very clear picture. And then the other one I watched was The Train with Chris Evans.
Korean?
Was it?
Korean movie?
No.
Oh, probably it's a remake, actually.
They're like in this really cold train, and yeah, I can't remember what it is, but anyway, just very like clear depictions of class, and you know how it is just something you're born into, and you can't really control where you are in the class structure, and ultimately it is kind of just up to luck. It is just where you're born, what zip code, what house.
Oh, you watched the second thought video, yeah?
Is it?
There is actually a research. They can predict your future income
based on your zip code. Yeah, I remember that. I haven't seen the video, but yeah, I mean, it's just so true. I think segregation is alive and well, not just based on race, but you know, race is still a very active measure of where and how successful you are.
But when we're talking about the YouTube, there is actually, I forgot, there is a fifth instrument that people say communists should do, you know, they should spread propaganda, you know.
Agitprop.
Yeah,
yeah.
And agitprop, yeah. And it's so bad in America, honestly saying. In Russia, YouTube channels, left YouTube channels, is such a high quality, honestly saying. There's videos that we're shooting, they are laughing at it like it's so low quality. It looks like
it's part of the aesthetic.
It looks like a good TV show, like professional. Like you turn on TV and you see it, and they're talking about socialism. It looks so cool, you know. And the standard is very high of the videos, you know. Like we tried to do videos, people were like, no, this is very bad to watch. Yeah. So yeah, but in America it's different. The quality of the videos is a little bit of low bar.
Oh yeah.
Propaganda is so weak here. Except Second Thought. Second Thought for me, it was a breath of fresh air, you know.
Oh yeah, but he's awesome.
Yeah, but only 10 minutes.
Yeah.
10 minutes. I don't know. People should live all, and it's only for newbies, you know.
Right. It is kind of.
Yeah,
you know.
and there is a Hakim, you know.
I love Hakim.
He's good.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm making these videos, you know, it's so simple, you know, like so, not a good edition, not a like, I don't know, it's, for me, it's like, this thing I already know, that thing I'm like, hard to watch, you know. Like
it's tough, man. Yeah. It's definitely something that's lacking.
What about the Cascadian Workers? Why you were shooting me, man? Why we don't make a Cascadian Workers YouTube channel where we're talking about all this stuff? You know?
We talk about that. I think we have
your Instagram is so simple, you know.
It is
so
very
rare,
simple.
you know.
But you should check it out. I really do think that we've talked about this a lot. Is like we need to make our presence more known, and we need to be agitating workers more.
But no resources.
Limited resources, that's one thing. And I think the other thing, I think this ties into limited resources actually, is we want to focus our work into building the skills and the tools necessary to actually know how to organize for our members. So it's a lot of internal development that we're not necessarily applying as externally as we could be. I think now that we are like in this period where we're growing pretty fast, we actually just recruited, I think, 8 people, I think it was. And, you know, we're still a very small org, to be fair. But with this growth that we're seeing, I think it is possible to say that we can develop more into that area. And it's something that, like, we have been tabling essentially for a while. We've been sort of waiting on it until we have the manpower, but now we're getting to the point where, oh, this is something we could do, like very easily just put up flyers, you know, like once a month. Pretty quick and easy thing to do.
Maybe useless.
And it, you know, might be, maybe, but putting that out, and then sort of getting ourselves out into the social media sphere a little more.
But how strong is solidarity between organizations? You know, like I'm sure there is a PSL who has like 100,000 followers probably, or there is a PSL on YouTube who has
We can
maybe
get plugged.
10,000. No, yeah, but can they like give you a commercial, like say, hey, this Cascadian Workers, they're so good, sign up for their Instagram or watch their on YouTube?
That's interesting, you know. I actually haven't thought of that. That's a really good thought.
Okay.
I will definitely be bringing that back to my organization. But we have collaborated with other organizations before. We had what was it? DSA, FRSO, PSL, Workers World. No, maybe? I can't remember.
I think Workers World are gone.
Yeah, you might be right.
They're
There was one more organization. The only wild card was DSA. We were surprised they joined this, but it was the No to NATO coalition at the beginning of the Ukrainian war. And we actually collaborated and I personally like called each of the representatives from each org and thanked them and had a good conversation about collaborating more in the future. And I think that's something we haven't necessarily utilized as much as we can. And I think you bring up a really great point that why don't we? We should.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm honestly saying I'm so impressed with your numbers, man. It's so good that workers of the US of Seattle are organizing or uniting, and workers around all the world are organizing. There is
That's
a
right.
Russian union. There is like an Uber in Russia, you know, like delivery club it's called. And there was actually, same as you are, there was a person who was organizing these drivers, you know, and he was very successful. He was pressuring on them. He was good. And then, like in April of this month, he got jailed.
Wow.
And for this 5 months,
Jesus.
he's still in jail, and they still didn't give him a accusation, you know, like they told that he organized some protest, illegal protest, like half a year ago before he was arrested, that he didn't actually organize. And they're still like doing paperwork, you know, like saying like you should just sit in jail and wait when we will call you, you know, like his name is Kirill Ukraintsev. Yeah, we are like Russian speaking socialists, communists, we're all united against him. And there is another example, like in Kazakhstan, my organization Red Yurt, they are organizing a teachers union, you know, because one of the teachers, she was working in private American school, you know, like, yeah, and she was treated very not good, you know, but she is a little bit old, you know, and legally she can be kicked out from the work to retirement, you know. And that's what happened to her. When she started doing some movements, they kicked her out. Yeah,
Jesus.
Her name is Zhanna Amarova. Yeah, and now she's creating union and trying to do that. But the thing is, when we say that to people, they're like, "Oh, she's retired. She's old. She shouldn't work. That's a good thing that they kicked her out, right? She's now doesn't have to work." And we're so pissed about it that it's legally it's all good. Yeah. But what's legally good, it's not always fair, man.
Yeah, and she wanted to keep organizing.
Yeah.
That's not right. Should be able to make that choice ourselves. Have a little more control in our lives.
Yeah, so
that's what it's all about.
Let's express our class solidarity with Zhanna Amarova, with Kirill Ukraintsev, with all worker organizers around the world, man.
I want to say to Kirill and Zhanna, thank you for your work. Please don't, if you can see this, if you're out of jail, if you're out of the fucking thumb of the state, thank you. Thank you for everything you've done. Please don't stop. And to every other worker across the world who's seeing this, thank you for all the effort you put into standing up for yourself, standing up for your health, and standing up for your well-being. And I wish you all solidarity in everything you do. And I wish us all to take this world and lose our chains.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. It was really an honor. I really appreciate that.